The Middle East is a mess. That, of course, should come as no surprise because the Middle East has been a mess for at least 70, 80 years. It's been a mess far longer than that, but it's been front page news mess ever since the State of Israel was founded. And it's created a complex patchwork of dueling cultures, countries, ethnicities, politics. The American scene here has been, at least historically, more consistent. America has, despite this ongoing show of bilateral support, the American government from both sides of the political aisle has arguably been unilaterally in support of Israel. There's no way to contest this. Ostensibly, one president after another has attempted to bring peace between the Jews in Israel and the Palestinian Arabs, but it is met with one failure after another. And there's no doubt complex reasons behind this failure, but the American political scene has been unilaterally pro Israel. We've provided Israel with billions of dollars in aid, especially military aid. There's been ongoing collaboration between our military and intelligence communities. And although we've paid lip service to this idea of a two-state solution, I'm quite sure that the Israelis, for the most part, have never believed in the feasibility of attaining that goal, especially considering that an independent Palestinian state, officially recognized by the world, would subsequently draft an army and arm themselves regardless of the provisos of whatever treaty was signed to make that two-state solution happen. And conversely, American Jews throughout all of this have exerted tremendous financial and political pressure on the American government to sustain this unilateral perspective. That all said, in the context for this podcast and the second part of it is a unity, a general unity that's been pervasive throughout the American Jewish community that brought American Jews together. American Jews have historically rallied around the state of Israel, embraced the essential principles and expression of Zionism, and it's been generally inclusive of a multi-generational agreement, not only that Israel has the right to exist and defend itself, but America should continue to unilaterally support Israel, provided billions in aid. And when it came down to disagreements, conflicts, open battle, abuses between Israel and the Palestinians have usually been wrong. They have violated truces, they have conducted terrorist actions, and they can blame only themselves for their plight, especially in Gaza when Israel left its occupation of that territory and put it into the hands, ostensibly, of the Palestinian people to self-govern the Strip. Ongoing conflict in the West Bank continues, rages stronger now than ever, because Israel feels that although the land officially belongs to the Palestinians, that it shouldn't. The West Bank is continuously contentious. Conflict rages because creating a seamless Israeli state through the West Bank, given its location, given its population, makes sense for a more unified and powerful Israel. As we know, Trump, one of his first statements coming into office, has been to conversely suggest that the Palestinians be exiled from Gaza and that Gaza be turned into the Riviera of the Middle East, resort hotels, casinos, a Middle Eastern paradise, facilitated and encouraged by basically kicking out the Palestinian population. Now, all of this comes together around this fascinating, surprising, and often alarming schism within the American Jewish community, which has reached its height post October 7th attacks. There was always a bit of tension between younger Jews with more ostensibly liberal and progressive belief systems who acknowledged the plight of the Palestinians, empathized with it, and actually put some of their support behind them. But within the Jewish community, and as an American Jew, I can attest to this sensibility. Many of these young people were equated with such marginal sects as Jews for Jesus. They were young Jews, idealistic, troubled, who had fallen off the reservation just to be different. All kids go through a phase of hating their parents, trying to cut their own swath as adults. And Jews for Jesus is one way of doing it, and marching on behest of Palestinian rights in Gaza and the West Bank is another. At least that's how it was perceived for years, for decades. But especially post October 7th, the rise in active protests of thousands, tens of thousands of young, liberal, progressive Jews in active support of the Palestinians has created within the American Jewish community a kind of civil war, a raging battle between these younger, more idealistic Jews who literally go marching in the street, not only waving Palestinian flags, but often overtly expressing their open and active support for Hamas, while generally the older, more conservative, Zionistic side of this civil war, also American Jews, often within the same families, are advocating an increasingly intense, militaristic, and even brutal response to these savage attacks of October 7. This has created quite a situation among American Jews. And I wrote 2 blog posts that address this issue. And one is an homage and a play off of a Chris Rock stand-up routine where he talks about an analogous kind of civil war, at least in attitude and intensity, among African American people. And my other missive was elaborating on and defining the roles played by these respective American Jewish segments who are waging this kind of internal civil war among American Jewish people. So I'm going to start with my faux Chris Rock routine, and I'm going to segue as part 2 into this missive where I define the militant Zionist on the one hand and the apologist liberal Jew, the apologist leftist Jew on the other, and see what you think. I feel that I, I sparked some ideas here, and I got interesting responses from my fellow American Jews. And I think that this is illustrative of a future where ultimately America's unilateral and unconditional support of Israel, despite the second ascendancy of the Trump administration, will be increasingly called into question. So let's give it a whirl. I'm eager to hear what you think. And I have a feeling whether or not you're an American Jew, whether you lean more toward the leftist apologist or to the militant Zionist, that you'll relate to this kind of conflict. And as to any kind of solution or outcome, I think it's as inherently intractable as the mess that is the Middle East. Hello and welcome to the Bald and Bloviating Podcast. I am your host, Mookie Spitz, and I am going to be talking about the civil war that's raging between Jewish people in America. The first part is a rant inspired, as I mentioned, by the comedian Chris Rock. Chris can joke about things related to his own race that a white comic can't even touch. And he does it with hysterical, delightfully controversial results, epitomized by his classic Civil War skit. I'll put a link to it in the description. It's an absolute classic, in my always humble opinion, of American stand-up comedy. And it brilliantly evokes some of the internal tensions within that community, but within ethnic communities and themselves the world over. Being Jewish and the son of Holocaust survivors, no less, I describe our own tribe's schism through the lens of Rock's timeless routine. Only this time, imagine a bald white guy in a leisure suit doing this, and not Chris Rock. I'm sharing it in the form of this audio podcast, and one of these days, maybe I'll actually shoot myself doing it. I've done a series of videos on TikTok and Instagram where I do little stand-up bits. I've got a fake microphone, and I've learned how to create a fake backdrop of a stage. And I think they're funny, and I might actually transcribe this expression into one of those. But for now, I am just sharing this in audio format, and I hope you enjoy it and triggers some thoughts. The quarrel described here not only fractures American Jewry now, but is a harbinger of deep fissures, as I mentioned, in the U.S.-Israeli alliance, and could even compromise Biden's chances in November, which it obviously did. I wrote this stand-up routine in March of 2024. And it surely did compromise Biden's chances in November. If you look at data from Pew, you had a lot of younger voters, a lot of voters from minority groups flipping to Trump from Biden, of which there were many of the Jews that I describe in this stand-up routine. So in ways, this stand-up routine and rant is somewhat prescient, because the data after it came in post-election, you had record numbers of ethnic minorities, religious minorities, including Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan, who flipped from Biden to Trump, angry about Biden's handling of the Gaza conflict since October 7th, only to embrace Donald J. Trump, who rose to political fame and infamy on the coattails of his Muslim ban. So memories are short in American culture and politics, and bedfellows are fickle. And it's interesting to see that this civil war has not only created a schism within the American Jewish community, but has riled up its Muslim and Palestinian counterpart. Humans across the planet tend to criticize and complain about those closest to them. So a lot of this is internal as well. Few relationships are more complex and contentious than with our own families and tribes. Hopefully, the feuding cousins, at least these cousins, the Jewish ones I describe in the stand-up-y routine, can someday reconcile. But for that to happen, lasting peace, even among the Jews, will have to break out. And given the Middle East track record, wish us Jews luck. Because until then, we're going to continue this fight. So here goes. And again, for reference, you might want to click on Chris Rock's epic Civil War skit is kind of a model that I am following here. There's a lot of anti-Semitism going on in the world right now. Now, who's more anti-Semitic, non-Jews or Jews? Jewish people. You know why? Jewish people hate Jewish people too. Everything non-Jews don't like about Jewish people really don't like about Jewish people. That's right. Some heavy shit is going on with Jewish people, even more so than usual. It's like a civil war is going on between Jewish people, and two sides have formed. Jewish people who love Israel and militant Zionists. And the militant Zionists have got to go. Every time Jewish people who love Israel criticize what the Israeli government is doing, ignorant ass militant Zionists want to fuck it up. You can't express an opinion about how the IDF is conducting this disastrous war in Gaza without some ignorant ass militant Zionists defending it. Unable to handle two ideas at the same time, militant Zionists can't understand how the statements Israel has the right to defend itself and the IDF doesn't need to kill thousands of Palestinian children to do it can both be true. Militant Zionists hate nuance and like dead Palestinians. Militant Zionists think everything Israel does is right because they think everything they do is right. And anyone who disagrees with them is their enemy and Israel's enemy, including their fellow Jews who love Israel who disagree with them because Israel is fucking this war up. It's so bad these days that a Jew can't go to a deli for lunch without getting into an argument with a militant Zionist. This is an awesome deli. They have such great food in here that every time I bite into a pastrami sandwich on rye bread with coleslaw, I imagine the IDF nuking Rafah. Hey, I love Jewish people, but I hate militant Zionists. Oh, do I hate militant Zionists. I hate them so much I hope I'm allowed to join the Ku Klux Klan. I'll do a drive-by from here to Yeshiva in Brooklyn. Every time I argue with the militant Zionists, I'm the guns of New York City. I'm Super Jew, TNT. I'm tired of militant Zionists. You can't have an intelligent debate when you're around militant Zionists. If you have it, you got to leave your brains and heart at the door. Why? Because their haughty self-righteousness and raging blood vengeance have annihilated common sense and compassion. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one. Rant militant Zionists, giving them carte blanche to believe and do whatever they want, all in the name of defending Israel from its many enemies. Why? Because Jews have been chosen. We are actually the victims, and Palestinians are subhuman. Arabs are the worst of all races, and Jews are the best. Duh! Who's won the most Nobel Prizes? Which country has the most tech startups? Question for a namby-pamby haaretz Jew. What was the GDP of Gaza before we destroyed 85% of it? Answer, the same as after we destroyed 85% of it. Damn, Moishe, I'm tired of militant Zionists. Tired of militant Zionists. And you know the worst thing about militant Zionists? They cite the Holocaust to justify everything the Israeli government does and label everyone who disagrees an anti Semite or a self loathing Jew. Here's proof. Because 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, Israel has the right to exist. Therefore, anyone who threatens Israel must be destroyed by any means they choose. And anyone who disagrees with how they choose to destroy them supports 6 million Jews being killed in the Holocaust. Therefore, if you agree with everything Israel says and does, you're okay. If you disagree with anything Israel says or does, you are automatically a genocidal anti Semitic maniac, just like 99.999999% of the world who already hates the Jews. So it doesn't even matter what Israel says or does. Right on. Hamas must be destroyed is the new rallying cry, justifying any and every action the IDF conducts in Gaza, no matter how brutal, indiscriminate, or unnecessary, especially when combined with the corollary belief all Palestinians are Hamas and its already catastrophic implications. Jews who love Israel agree that Hamas has got to go. The disagreement about how is what's going on here. Militant Zionists eagerly follow the 100x retaliatory playbook, the same one Hamas knew the IDF would use, resulting in the destruction of Gaza that has again made the Palestinian cause front page news. A good idea in warfare is to not do what your enemy wants you to do, which flies over the head and between the legs of militant Zionists. Flattening most of Gaza and killing 1% of the entire population has triggered global anti-Israel, anti-American, anti-Semitic rage and put the whole region on edge. Rather than conduct targeted attacks and seek diplomatic transformation, Israel has killed thousands of Palestinian civilians, displaced millions multiple times, and now starves them. Asked if that's worth it, militant Zionists cite the strategic prowess and boundless infallibility of the Israeli Defense Forces. The same IDF folks who knew about the October 7th attack more than a year in advance noticed unusual activity at the border hours before the invasion, waited 12 hours to respond, and likely inflicted a significant amount of unreported friendly fire when they finally did, is the IDF that the militant Zionist loves and extols with impunity. I don't see your medals, they shout at us Jews who love Israel but have succumbed to liberal propaganda and are just stupid. You have no idea what it's like there. This is war. Hamas must be destroyed, and the entire region of heathens must be taught a lesson so they never try that again. Don't question Netanyahu either, despite fragmenting and distracting Israeli society prior to the attacks, being warned of the security threat, enabling Qatar to send cash to Hamas as a hedge against the Palestinian Authority, while fortifying the West Bank instead of the Gaza border. Yes, I'm tired of this shit. And you know the very worst thing about militant Zionists? Nothing makes a militant Zionist happier than blaming the Palestinians for everything. Peace has been impossible between Israel and the Palestinians because it's always, always, always entirely the Arabs' fault. Go ahead, ask a militant Zionist a question. Why does Israel continue to build settlements in the West Bank? I don't know that shit, they respond. Keeping it real. And by keeping it real, they mean making a two-state solution impossible because we don't want to cede any land or power ever to the Palestinians. Don't bother arguing with a militant Zionist either because they are convinced negotiating with the Palestinians is impossible. Any hint of Palestinian statehood is like kryptonite to a militant Zionist. So all Israel can do is to get attacked every few years, then kill a bunch of Arabs, rinse, and repeat. I'm tired of this shit. Threat levels rising. Iran continues to capitalize on the growing chaos. Israeli defensive strategy from 1948, 1967, 1973 onward can no longer work. Its enemies powerful to the point of posing an existential threat. Force alone can't deter. Only honest diplomacy works long term. Meanwhile, militant Zionists signed 2,000-pound U.S. made bombs launched from U.S. made jets headed for Gaza. Effervescing with zero empathy for crushed and disemboweled Palestinian children, militant Zionists wear necklaces for the hostages, claiming more destruction will rescue them. Jews who love Israel instead want to see the Biden administration grow a pair and agree with Schumer that Bibi must go. They criticize the IDF not because they hate Israel, but because they believe the country is acting against its own interests. Israel becomes weaker, Hamas ideology never stronger. Contrary to what militant Zionists claim, criticizing Israel is not supporting Hamas. A theocratic, authoritarian mafia, Hamas has indeed squandered billions in aid to build tunnels, buy rockets, and launch an attack that killed, mutilated, raped, and kidnapped over 1,000 left-leaning kibbutzim. Iran and its proxies also embody a culture and society antithetical to enlightened values. Hezbollah along the Lebanese border has thousands of rockets poised to rain down on Israeli cities, and thousands of residents on both sides of the border have been forced to flee. Israel cannot relent. So I see most of the Jews I grew up with, most of the generation who saw Israel as the struggling underdog instead of the imperial bully, looking at me. Why you gotta say that, they ask. Why criticize our tribe? The enemy is Hamas and their precedent, their goal, Israel's destruction. Well, I don't see Hamas standing in the way of peace right now. I see Netanyahu and his batshit crazy cabinet of right-wing maniacs. Israel is in the driver's seat, as frankly they've been for decades. Half the population is Palestinian anyway. They're right there, and they aren't going anywhere. So stop the war. Stop building West Bank settlements. Partner with the same Arab countries you've struck peace and security deals with to start negotiating security and peace with the Palestinians, who, thanks to the overreaction of the IDF in Gaza, are now front and center in the region. Hamas is done ruling Gaza, but the ideas that spawned and sustained them have only been magnified. Ask yourselves, militant Zionists, have you killed more terrorists than you've created? The math is not on your side, and neither are the long-term odds. Israel must evolve even if you don't. And ask yourselves, militant Zionists, will unconditional American support of Israel indefinitely continue? The U.S. demographic is changing, and with it, blind bipartisan support. You think I'm a Hamas loving liberal apologist Jew? Well, I hate them too. Regardless, the clock is ticking on U.S. aid to Israel. I bet you also think I'm naive because the only language understood throughout the Middle East is force. When I say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting the same results, you want to kick my ass. I have my own strategies, you really tough guy. Let's take it outside. Now, again, I wrote this while Biden was obviously still in the Oval Office. The post is dated March 31st, 2024, half a year, months before the election, where Kamala Harris got her ass kicked by Donald Trump. Trump 2.0 has ushered in a complete turnaround in U.S. policy. Any vacillation that Biden exhibited regarding Netanyahu, at least in perception, has been swept away by open, unconditional, unilateral support for Israel from the White House. Mike Huckabee has been appointed ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Israel, and he believes, like his fellow evangelicals, that the Jews in Israel are protecting the Holy Land for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Mike Huckabee and his brethren literally see the state of Israel as the landing strip for Jesus. When Armageddon hits, the Jews are there to protect the promised land and welcome Jesus' return. As such, Huckabee and now the administration has not only suggested that the Palestinians leave, but that the West Bank also be annexed. This is not official U.S. policy, but it's been articulated by senior leadership. Another major change since I wrote this is that Israel is more powerful now militarily than ever before. Hamas is not even a military threat. Hezbollah has been surprisingly neutralized by that stunning walkie-talkie sabotage and elimination of most of Hezbollah's leadership in 2 days, followed by an unbelievable World War II level strategic bombing campaign, likely driven and targeted by artificial intelligence, flattening huge swaths of South Lebanon, and essentially eliminating Iran's other proxy threatening Israel. With Hamas neutralized, with Hezbollah neutralized, the only proxy left are the Houthis. And the Trump administration is now actively bombing the Houthis. There was a New York Times story that broke that wasn't denied, that Netanyahu was ready with America in tow to bomb the nuclear facilities in Iran in May. I'm recording this at the end of April. Trump himself apparently interceded, wanting to at least give diplomacy a try. That cooled Netanyahu's jets, American jets were actually restationed in the region for this attack, apparently. And negotiations have begun in various locations between senior level Iranian and American negotiators. So Trump apparently wants to avoid war, which makes sense given the fact that his tariffs are freaking out the global markets, already raising consumer prices. The only saving grace for Trump so far economically is low oil prices, which would no longer be the case after such an attack. They could literally double in a day if Iran takes retaliatory action on the Strait, maybe even against Saudi oil fields. The possibility of such a bombing of Iran's nuclear program could result in significant increases in the world's energy costs, throwing a bigger wrench in Trump's economic disruption. So there's a lot riding on this negotiation. Some feel that it's just going through the motions and that the bombing is inevitable. I personally feel that the bombing's inevitable. Netanyahu's political future is dependent on it happening. And Israel, for decades, has been wanting desperately to eliminate Iran's nuclear capability and potential. All that said, despite Israel turning this around militarily, the internal conflict within the American Jewish community rages even more strongly. The militant Zionist side of the house has been arguing that all these force expressions have been necessary. And their point has ostensibly been proven by Hamas and Hezbollah being neutralized, the Americans already actively engaging with the Houthis, and the next step of bombing the Iranian nuclear program seems imminent. But all of this begs the question. Here's the key element. All of that begs the question of figuring out how to ostensibly fix the Israeli Palestinian mess. Contrary to Trump's suggestion, the Palestinians aren't going anywhere in Gaza or the West Bank unless something radical needs to take place. The idea of a two-state solution has never been more distant. Israelis overall have a huge skepticism, more so than usual. And the Palestinians themselves are completely disunited, full of discord, suffering worse than they ever have been, with no end in sight, even to the conflict, the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Something like 50 remaining live Israeli hostages are still in Gaza. The IDF has set up security zones within Gaza, which hints at a long-term occupation. And it looks like Israel has settled into the next quantum leap of the same old of mowing the lawn, which is keeping Gaza in ruins and neutralized, keeping Hezbollah at bay, and setting their eyes on Iran. And internally, the American Jewish community fights and kvetches with the liberal side of the house, the side that I posited here as the Jews who love Israel and are therefore able to criticize it, silenced for the most part, along with the silence of the Democrats, who, despite hundreds of thousands protesting with AOC and Bernie, have become almost fatalistic when people hope for a Democrat resurgence in the midterm, the common reaction is, are we even going to have midterms? So everything is turned upside down, and there doesn't seem to be any reconciliation of the schism. And if nothing else, an exaggeration of it, but with the added twist that the militant Zionists, at least for now, seem to have really convincingly won this battle. I find it fascinating, curious what you think. And in part 2, I am going to read the message that I wrote from an American Jew to my fellow American Jews, more formally defining these segments, the leftist apologists, as I call them, and the militant Zionists, draw out their differences and point to at least the hope of their reconciliation, which seems overdue given how American Jews just love a robust debate, one which these days has become impossible in our increasingly and chaotically polarized political climate. Stay tuned. I'll put the links in the description. And thanks for listening to the Bald and Bloviating podcast, where even the worst expressions of history and culture and politics infeuding among even ethnic groups, where minorities cannibalize themselves as leaders take advantage of that discord. Even all this is fuel for, at the very least, a good rant.